Hey everyone, so this is the iPhone 13 Pro. This phone came out back in 2021, and now that we're here in late 2025, a good amount of time has passed. With the new iPhone 17 Pro out, and all the new hardware and software features like massive camera zoom and Apple Intelligence, it's a fair question to ask, how does this phone actually hold up today? Is it still worth considering? In this video, we're going to talk about just that. We'll look at how the design and that beautiful ProMotion display have held up. We'll talk performance, especially on the new iOS 26 and the all-important battery life, and trust me, we need to talk about the battery. We'll also look at the cameras, what you're missing out on with software, and then get to the big one. Should you buy one, keep the one you have, or is it finally time to upgrade? Let's get into it. And just so we're clear, everything I'm saying about the 6.1-inch 13 Pro also goes for the 6.7-inch 13 Pro Max. The only real difference is, the size and the battery, and I'll touch on that as we go. So before we look at it in 2025, I think it's important to remember why this phone was such a huge deal when it launched. It wasn't just another yearly update, this was a major step up for the iPhone lineup. The biggest reason, and the feature that still makes this phone feel incredibly modern, was ProMotion. This was the very first iPhone to get a high refresh rate display. It has an adaptive refresh rate that can go all the way down to 10 Hz when you're looking at a static image to save power, and ramp all the way up to 120 Hz when you're scrolling or gaming. It made everything feel buttery smooth and incredibly responsive, and honestly, it was a game changer that made it hard to go back to a 60 Hz screen. But it wasn't just the screen. This phone was a true Pro package through and through. It had the A15 Bionic chip, but the Pro models got a version with a more powerful 5-core GPU, which was a nice boost for graphics and gaming. The camera system was completely overhauled with a new, much larger main sensor that let in way more light, a brand new 3x telephoto lens, and an ultra-wide camera that could now do incredible macro photography. And maybe most importantly for its long-term health, it came with 6GB of RAM. That extra RAM compared to the 4GB in the standard iPhone 13 is one of the secret ingredients to why this phone has aged so well, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. Okay, so let's start with the physical phone itself, and honestly, it still feels incredible to hold. The surgical grade stainless steel, the matte glass back, the flat edges, it just has this premium heft and density that feels so solid. This graphite finish has held up beautifully over the years, and the ceramic shield front glass is as tough as ever. And that display, it's still just fantastic. It's a Super Retina XDR OLED panel, which means you get perfect blacks and amazing contrast. It gets plenty bright for outdoor use with a typical max brightness of 1000 nits, and it can even push to 1200 nits for HDR content, so movies and photos look vibrant and punchy. But really, it all comes back to ProMotion. Even now, if you put this next to a brand new last year standard iPhone 16 that's still locked at 60 Hz, this 4-year-old screen just feels smoother and more responsive. That ProMotion display was and still is a game changer. Now for the part that probably matters most, how does it actually run 4 years later, especially on the brand new iOS 26? Apple just introduced that new liquid glass animation system, which looks amazing, but it's gotta be resource heavy. And honestly, I'm still seriously impressed. Day to day, this phone is still incredibly fluid. Apps open up quick, scrolling through feeds is smooth, and swiping between my open apps feels really responsive. It just doesn't feel like a 4-year-old phone. To put some numbers to it, I ran Geekbench 6 and it scored 2417 on single core and 5766 on multi-core. For perspective, these scores are still incredibly respectable. The A15 Bionic was a beast of a chip with its 2 high-performance cores and 4 efficiency cores, and it really shows. It's more than powerful enough for 99% of what you do on a phone. But this is where the Pro really matters. I have another video on the standard iPhone 13, and on that phone with its 4GB of RAM, apps are constantly reloading in the background if you're a heavy multitasker. Here on the 13 Pro with 6GB, that just doesn't happen nearly as often. It's not quite as good at holding apps in memory as the 8GB on the iPhone 15 and 16 Pro, and you can definitely feel the difference compared to the 12GB on the new 17 Pro, but the gap is way less noticeable than the jump from 4GB to 6GB. That extra RAM is the secret sauce to its longevity. I also did some gaming on it, with some of the really demanding titles like Genshin Impact, and it's still very playable. You can run most games on high settings and get a great experience, thanks in large part to that 5-core GPU. And one thing is, yeah, it definitely gets warm after a long session. It doesn't really throttle or drop frames too badly, but you can feel the chip working hard. Okay, let's have a real talk about the battery, because if you're looking at a 4-year-old iPhone, this is probably your biggest concern, and you'd be right to be concerned. My unit here is at 71% battery health, and with this battery, I'm having to charge it 2, sometimes 3 times a day just to get through with my normal usage. The standby drain is also pretty bad. It just seems to lose charge much faster sitting on my desk than it did when the health was above 80%. But here's the thing that most people don't realize. It's not just that the battery dies faster. When an iPhone's battery degrades significantly, iOS will actually start to manage the processor's performance to prevent the phone from unexpectedly shutting down. That means the phone is literally running slower because of the old battery. So if your 13 Pro feels a bit sluggish, it might not be the chip's fault, it's the battery holding it back. The solution: a battery replacement. It's the single best thing you can do for this phone. I've seen countless comments from users online who say that after getting a new battery, their phone felt blazing fast and like new again. When this phone was new, the battery life was excellent thanks to its 3095 mAh cell. And the Pro Max was an absolute champion with its massive 4352 mAh battery. A replacement brings that all back. So if you're considering this phone or have one with a tired battery, just factor in the cost of a replacement. It's not a repair, it's a performance upgrade. The cameras on the 13 Pro were a big leap forward with bigger sensors and that new telephoto lens. And in 2025, for day-to-day photos, especially in good light, it's still a fantastic camera system. You get a triple 12 megapixel setup, a main wide camera with a fast f1.5 aperture, a great ultra wide with an f1.8 aperture, and a dedicated 3x optical telephoto lens. Photos are detailed, the colors from Apple's smart HDR4 processing are great, and having that clean optical 3x zoom is a true pro feature that you still don't get on standard iPhones. The macro mode, which uses the ultra wide lens, is also still excellent for getting super close-up shots. But this is also where you start to see the phone's age. The camera world has moved on, and you can really see the gap when you put it up against something like the new iPhone 17 Pro. The 12 megapixel sensors here just can't resolve the same amount of fine detail as the 48 megapixel sensors that have been in the Pro models since the iPhone 15 Pro. This becomes really obvious when you try to crop in on a photo. And while the 3x zoom is great, it pales in comparison to the 5x on the 16 Pro, let alone the 8x optical zoom on the 17 Pro. For video, it's still a beast. It shoots beautiful 4K video and was one of the first iPhones to introduce ProRes recording for professional workflows. The one limitation is that cinematic mode, which creates that nice shallow depth of field effect, is capped at 1080p. Newer iPhones can shoot cinematic video in 4K, which is a noticeable difference if you use that feature a lot. Okay, software support. The good news is this phone is running the latest iOS 26, and as I said, it handles it really well. You get all the new design stuff, the security updates, everything. But there's one big new feature you don't get: Apple Intelligence. This is kind of the new reality for older iPhones. It used to be that a phone was obsolete when it stopped getting iOS updates. Now, a phone can run the latest OS, but still be locked out of the newest, most processor-intensive features. Apple Intelligence requires the A17 Pro chip or newer, which means it only works on the iPhone 15 Pro and later models. The iPhone 13 Pro is left out. So is that a deal breaker? For me, honestly, not really, and here's why. Apple Intelligence, it's still kind of in its early days, like a public beta. It's great for on-device tasks and simple integrations, but for the heavy lifting, I'm usually turning to alternatives anyway, like Gemini or ChatGPT, which are frankly more powerful right now. They can handle more complex reasoning, remember more of our conversation, and integrate with a wider range of services. So while not having Apple's native AI is a downside, it's one that's pretty easy to work around with third-party apps. So let's just quickly recap the things you need to consider if you're thinking about this phone in late 2025. First, the battery. Any used model you find will have a degraded battery. You absolutely have to factor in the cost of a replacement to get the best experience. Second, the Lightning port. It's the old standard in a world that has fully moved to USB-C. It's an inconvenience, especially when you're trying to borrow a charger. Third, the camera system. It's very capable, but it's clearly outclassed in pure detail and zoom range by the newer Pro models. Fourth, no Apple Intelligence. You're cut off from Apple's next generation of integrated AI features. And finally, the design. You still have the notch at the top of the display, not the more modern and functional dynamic island that came with the iPhone 14 Pro. And this brings us to the big question. If you have this phone, should you upgrade? I've been using this phone for a long time. It was my main daily driver for 2 years. I skipped the 14 Pro because the upgrade felt small. I went to the 15 Pro, skipped the 16 Pro, and my 17 Pro is literally on its way. And I think that tells you everything. After 4 years, the time is right because the jump you get now is huge. The iPhone 13 Pro was so good that for a few years, the upgrades felt pretty incremental. But we're past that now. The jump from this phone to a new Pro model is a true generational leap. Let's just look at the quick specs side by side. As you can see, the jump to even last year's 16 Pro is big, but the leap to the 17 Pro is just massive in every single category. So here's my final conclusion. If you're still using an iPhone 13 Pro or Pro Max, you've had a fantastic phone for 4 years. It served you well, but I genuinely think now is the perfect time to upgrade. The jump to a 16 Pro is great value, especially with price drops you can find now, but the leap to the 17 Pro will feel like you're getting a device from the future. It's a massive, massive improvement in every way. If you're on a tight budget and considering buying one of these used, it can still be a solid phone, especially for a price around $300, but that's only if you factor in the cost of a new battery. Without that, I wouldn't recommend it. With a fresh battery, it's still a very capable device for the money. The fact that we can even have this conversation about a 4-year-old phone is a testament to how good the iPhone 13 Pro really was. It was a peak iPhone for its time. But technology moves on, and the new generation is finally offering a leap that's worth making. What do you guys think? If you're still rocking the 13 Pro, let me know your experience in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.